The elevator doors closed with a soft ping, and Penelope James found herself trapped in the small space with the last person she wanted to see at 7:30 on a Monday morning. Sebastian Valez, the enigmatic CEO of Paragon Publishing who lived in the penthouse of her apartment building, stood in the corner looking impeccable as always in his tailored charcoal suit. For a year, they'd shared these brief moments of small talk, neither of them crossing the invisible line between being polite neighbors and something more. That's why his next words shocked her to her core. "Penelope, would you like to have dinner with me on Friday?" Penelope nearly dropped her coffee. After 12 months of exchanging pleasantries about the weather, local news, and the occasionally malfunctioning mailroom, Sebastian had actually asked her out. She'd spent countless elevator rides secretly admiring his strong jawline and warm brown eyes, all while convincing herself that the CEO would never be interested in an ordinary graphic designer like her. "Yes," she answered immediately, surprising even herself with the lack of hesitation. "I'd like that." The look of astonishment that crossed Sebastian's face was almost comical. For a man who commanded boardrooms and made million-dollar decisions daily, he seemed genuinely shocked by her quick acceptance. "Really?" he asked, his usually confident voice tinged with disbelief. Just like that, Penelope smiled, feeling a strange surge of confidence. Just like that. The elevator reached the lobby and the doors slid open. Sebastian stepped forward, holding them for her with an outstretched arm. "I'll pick you up at 7, he said, a smile playing at his lips. "Apartment 718, right?" she nodded, wondering how he knew her apartment number when she'd never mentioned it. Before she could ask, Sebastian was walking away, his phone already at his ear as he strode through the revolving doors to the waiting car outside. Penelope stood frozen in the lobby for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. After a year of mundane small talk, her mysterious CEO neighbor had asked her out, and she'd said yes without a second thought. What had she gotten herself into? The morning breeze snapped Penelope out of her daze as she stepped outside. She'd need to hurry if she wanted to make it to work on time, but her mind was elsewhere. Why had Sebastian asked her out now, after all this time? And more importantly, why had she agreed so readily? She'd moved into the Westbrook apartments 13 months ago, stretching her budget to afford the one-bedroom unit in the upscale building. She'd first encountered Sebastian in the elevator 2 weeks later, recognizing him immediately from his photo on the 30 Under 40, Publishing's Rising Stars article she'd read in Business Weekly. At 35, he was already the CEO of one of the country's fastest-growing publishing houses, known for his innovative approach and eye for breakthrough authors. Their first interaction had been brief, a simple nod of acknowledgement. The second time, he'd commented on the weather. By the third encounter, they'd established a pattern of polite small talk that never ventured beyond superficial topics. It was comfortable, predictable, and entirely safe. Until today. Penelope arrived at Visionary Graphics with minutes to spare, slipping into her cubicle just as the office began to buzz with activity. Her best friend and co-worker, Maddie Chen, appeared moments later with an expectant look on her face. "You look different today," Maddie observed, perching on the edge of Penelope's desk. "Spill." "My neighbor asked me out," Penelope said, still unable to fully believe it herself. "Wait, the hot CEO neighbor, the one you've been drooling over for a year." "I haven't been drooling," Penelope protested weakly, knowing full well that she'd spent countless coffee breaks describing Sebastian's perfect suits and the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. "Whatever you say," Maddie grinned. "So when's the date?" "Friday night. He's picking me up at 7. "And you said yes, obviously." "Immediately," Penelope admitted. I didn't even think about it, the word just came out. Maddie gave a triumphant fist pump. Finally, now we just need to figure out what you're going to wear. She glanced at her watch and grimaced. But that'll have to wait. Staff meeting in 5. The rest of Penelope's day passed in a blur of client calls and design revisions. By the time she left the office, the reality of her upcoming date had fully settled in, bringing with it a mixture of excitement and anxiety. She'd been single for nearly 2 years following a breakup with her college boyfriend. The thought of dating again, especially someone like Sebastian, was terrifying. The elevator in her building was mercifully empty when she stepped inside that evening, giving her a moment alone with her thoughts. But as the doors began to close, a hand shot through the gap and Sebastian stepped inside, looking slightly disheveled for the first time since she'd known him. His tie was loosened, and his hair appeared as though he'd run his hands through it multiple times. "Penelope," he said, sounding genuinely pleased to see her. "How was your day?" "Good," she replied, suddenly very aware of how close they were standing. "Busy but good. Yours? Challenging," he admitted with a sigh. Had to deal with an author threatening to pull their manuscript 2 months before publication. It was the most personal information he'd ever shared with her. Usually, his responses were vague, fine, or productive. This glimpse into his actual workday felt significant somehow. "That sounds stressful," she offered. "Did you resolve it?" "For now." Sebastian ran a hand through his hair, confirming her earlier suspicion. "We've rescheduled a meeting for tomorrow. Publishing is 90% managing egos and 10% actually publishing books." Penelope laughed, and Sebastian's expression softened, his eyes lingering on her face for a moment longer than usual. "About Friday," he said as the elevator approached her floor. "Any food preferences or allergies I should know about?" "No allergies," she replied. "And I'm pretty adventurous with food." "Perfect." The elevator stopped at the 7th floor, and Sebastian actually moved his hand to hold the doors open for her. "I'll see you tomorrow, Penelope." "See you tomorrow, Sebastian." As the doors closed, Penelope felt a flutter of anticipation in her stomach. Tomorrow, and then Friday. A date with Sebastian Valez. The next morning, Penelope took extra care with her appearance, choosing a navy blue dress that hugged her curves without being too obvious about it. She told herself it was just a regular workday outfit, but deep down, she knew she was dressing for the possibility of running into Sebastian. Her efforts were rewarded when she stepped into the elevator and found him already inside, coffee in hand and looking as immaculate as ever. "Good morning," he said, his eyes traveling quickly over her outfit with appreciation. "You look lovely today." "Thank you," she replied, feeling a blush creep up her neck. "How did your meeting go?" "Rescheduled again," he said with a slight frown. The joys of working with temperamental best-selling authors. They fell into an easy conversation about work challenges, and Penelope found herself sharing stories about difficult clients and impossible deadlines. By the time they reached the lobby, they were both laughing, and Penelope realized with a start that this was the longest conversation they'd ever had. "I should warn you," Sebastian said as they walked toward the building exit. "The press has been particularly interested in Paragon lately because of our new imprint launch. If we're seen together on Friday, there might be some attention." Penelope hesitated, the reality of dating someone in Sebastian's position suddenly hitting her. "Is that going to be a problem for you?" "For me?" Sebastian looked genuinely surprised. "No, not at all. I was more concerned about you. Some of the gossip sites can be invasive." "I'm not worried," Penelope said with more confidence than she felt. "I lead a pretty boring life. There's not much for them to dig up." Sebastian's smile was warm as he held the door open for her. Then I look forward to Friday even more. The next 2 days passed in a similar fashion, longer conversations in the elevator, lingering goodbyes, and a growing sense of anticipation. By Thursday evening, Penelope and Maddie had spent hours on video chat debating outfit options for the date. The red dress, Maddie insisted. It's sexy without being over the top. But what if he takes me somewhere super fancy? It might not be formal enough. Pen, the man is worth millions. He's definitely taking you somewhere fancy, but the red dress works for any upscale restaurant in the city. Penelope finally relented, hanging the knee-length red dress on her closet door in preparation for tomorrow. As she was about to call it a night, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Looking forward to tomorrow, 7 p.m. Dress warm enough for a short walk after dinner. Sebastian, she stared at the message, wondering how he'd gotten her number before remembering that resident's contact information was listed in the building directory. Quickly, she saved his number and typed a reply. Looking forward to it too. Thanks for the dress code hint. His response came almost immediately. I realized I never asked for your number. Hope you don't mind. Not at all, she wrote back, smiling at her phone. Get some rest, Penelope. Tomorrow will be special. She fell asleep that night with Sebastian's words replaying in her mind. A mixture of nervousness and excitement making her toss and turn well past midnight. Friday arrived with perfect autumn weather, clear skies and temperatures cool enough for a light jacket, but warm enough to be comfortable. Penelope left work early to give herself plenty of time to get ready, ignoring Maddie's knowing smirk as she rushed out of the office. At home, she took her time with her preparations, applying her makeup with extra care and styling her hair in soft waves that framed her face. The red dress fit perfectly, accentuating her curves while remaining elegant. She completed the look with black heels and a simple gold pendant necklace. At precisely 7 o'clock, there was a knock at her door. Taking a deep breath, Penelope opened it to find Sebastian standing there, looking devastatingly handsome in a dark blue suit that fit him like it had been tailored specifically for this night. In one hand, he held a bouquet of white lilies. Penelope, he said, his eyes widening slightly as he took in her appearance. You look absolutely stunning. Thank you, she replied, accepting the flowers with a smile. You clean up pretty well yourself. These are for you, he said, somewhat unnecessarily. I remembered you mentioned lilies were your favorite when Mrs. Davenport from 812 brought some to the tenant meeting last spring. Penelope was touched that he'd remembered such a small detail from a conversation that must have lasted all of 30 seconds nearly 6 months ago. They're beautiful, she said, inviting him in while she found a vase. I just need a minute to put these in water. Sebastian waited patiently in her living room, his eyes taking in the small but tastefully decorated apartment. Unlike the minimalist modern style she imagined his penthouse must have, her space was warm and eclectic, with colorful artwork adorning the walls and mismatched furniture that somehow worked together harmoniously. Your home reflects you, he commented as she returned from the kitchen. Creative, warm, inviting. Thank you, she said, pleasantly surprised by his observation. Ready to go, absolutely. In the elevator, Sebastian seemed more relaxed than she'd ever seen him, his usual businesslike demeanor softened by genuine excitement. I hope you like Italian, he said as they reached the lobby. I've made reservations at Luciano's. Penelope's eyes widened. Luciano's was one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, known for its month-long waiting list and celebrity clientele. I've always wanted to try it, she admitted. How did you get a reservation on such short notice? Sebastian gave her a small smile. The owner and I go way back. He's actually published a cookbook with Paragon. Outside, a sleek black car waited at the curb. The driver nodded respectfully at Sebastian before opening the door for Penelope. "Miss James," he said politely. "This is David," Sebastian explained as they settled into the back seat. "He's been driving me for years." "Nice to meet you, David," Penelope said, trying to appear unfazed by the luxury car and private driver. The drive to Luciano's was brief, filled with easy conversation about their respective weeks. Penelope found herself relaxing in Sebastian's company, his genuine interest in her work and life making her feel valued and seen. As expected, the restaurant was exquisite, intimate lighting, soft classical music, and impeccable service. The maitre d' greeted Sebastian by name and led them to a secluded corner table with a view of the city skyline. "Mr. Valez, Miss James," he said, presenting them with menus. "Chef Luciano will be preparing his special tasting menu for you tonight, with your approval." "That sounds perfect," Sebastian replied, looking to Penelope for confirmation. She nodded, still taking in the elegance of her surroundings. Once they were alone, Sebastian leaned forward slightly. "I hope this isn't too much for a first date," he said, a hint of vulnerability in his voice. "I wanted it to be memorable." "It's perfect," she assured him, "though I am curious why now. We've been neighbors for over a year." Sebastian's expression turned thoughtful as he considered her question. "Honestly, I've wanted to ask you out since the first time I saw you struggling with your grocery bags in the lobby." He smiled at the memory. "You were trying to hold the door open with your foot while balancing 3 paper bags. I should have helped you then, but I was on an important call." "I remember that day," Penelope said, surprised. "It was my first grocery run after moving in. The next time I saw you was in the elevator, and I managed to comment about the weather which you politely responded to, and somehow that became our pattern." He paused as the sommelier approached to pour their wine. "The truth is, I kept finding reasons not to ask you out. Too busy with work, bad timing, worried about seeming inappropriate since we're neighbors." "What changed?" Penelope asked, genuinely curious. "My sister," Sebastian admitted with a laugh. "I mentioned our elevator conversations to her, and she told me I was being ridiculous. Said if I didn't ask you out soon, I'd be making small talk about the weather when we were both 80. Penelope laughed, charmed by his candor. "Well, I'm glad she convinced you." "So am I," Sebastian said, raising his wine glass. "To taking chances." "To taking chances," she echoed, clinking her glass against his. The dinner that followed was nothing short of magical. The chef's tasting menu was a culinary journey through Italy, each dish more delicious than the last. Sebastian was attentive and engaging, asking thoughtful questions and sharing stories about his journey from editorial assistant to CEO. Penelope found herself opening up as well, talking about her passion for design and her dream of eventually starting her own studio. "What made you choose publishing?" she asked as they shared a decadent chocolate dessert. "I've always loved books," Sebastian replied, his expression softening. "My mother was a high school literature teacher, and our house was filled with books of every genre. When I was 10, she was diagnosed with cancer." He paused, his voice growing quieter. "During her treatment, books became her escape and mine. I'd read to her when she was too tired to hold a book herself." "I'm so sorry," Penelope said softly, instinctively reaching across the table to touch his hand. "She recovered," Sebastian continued, turning his hand to hold hers. "But that experience showed me the power of stories, how they can transport you, comfort you, connect you. I knew then that I wanted to be part of bringing those stories into the world." Penelope felt a surge of warmth toward him, seeing beyond the successful CEO to the passionate, caring man beneath. "That's beautiful," she said sincerely, "and a much better origin story than mine. I decided to become a graphic designer because I was obsessed with album covers as a teenager." Sebastian laughed, his thumb absently tracing circles on her hand. "I think that's a pretty great reason too. Art that moves you is powerful, no matter the form." As they finished their meal, Sebastian asked if she'd be up for a short walk before heading home. The restaurant was close to the river, where a newly developed promenade offered stunning views of the city lights reflecting on the water. "I'd love that," Penelope agreed, glad she'd chosen comfortable enough heels for walking. Outside, the autumn air was crisp but pleasant. Sebastian offered her his jacket, which she gratefully accepted, breathing in the subtle scent of his cologne as it settled around her shoulders. They strolled along the promenade, their conversation flowing naturally from work to childhood memories to favorite books and movies. When Penelope shivered slightly, Sebastian hesitated for just a moment before putting his arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him, enjoying the warmth and solid presence of his body next to hers. "I have a confession to make," Sebastian said as they paused to look out over the water. "I was completely shocked when you said yes to dinner. I had at least 3 backup responses prepared for when you turned me down." Penelope looked up at him in surprise. "Why would you think I'd say no?" "Because you're you," he said simply. "Beautiful, talented, kind. I've seen your designs in the elevator ads for that children's charity event. You're incredible at what you do." "You knew those were mine?" she asked, surprised. "I asked the charity director who their designer was when I made a donation. She showed me your portfolio." He looked slightly embarrassed. "That might have been another reason I hesitated to ask you out, afraid you'd think I was some sort of stalker." Penelope laughed, strangely flattered by his admission. "Not a stalker, just thorough. That's a nicer way of putting it." He turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "I'm really glad you said yes, Penelope." "Me too," she replied softly. For a moment they stood there looking at each other, the city lights reflecting in Sebastian's dark eyes. Then slowly, he leaned down and brushed his lips against hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. Penelope responded immediately, rising slightly on her toes to press closer, her hand coming up to rest against his chest. The kiss deepened, neither of them rushing but both unwilling to pull away. When they finally broke apart, Sebastian rested his forehead against hers, his breathing slightly uneven. "That was worth a year of small talk," he murmured, making her laugh. "Definitely," she agreed, reluctantly stepping back but keeping her hand in his. "Though I'm a little mad at us both for wasting all that time." "We have plenty of time to make up for it," Sebastian said, squeezing her hand as they began walking back toward the car. The ride home was comfortable, their hands intertwined on the seat between them. When they reached their building, Sebastian dismissed David for the night, saying he'd see himself up in the elevator. Sebastian pressed the button for the 7th floor first, then the penthouse level. As they ascended, he kept hold of her hand, his thumb tracing gentle patterns across her skin. "Would you like to have dinner again tomorrow?" he asked. "Or is that too soon? I don't want to overwhelm you." Penelope smiled, touched by his consideration. "Tomorrow sounds perfect." The elevator stopped at her floor, but before the doors could open, Sebastian pulled her closer for another kiss, this one more confident than the first but still achingly tender. "Good night, Penelope," he whispered against her lips. "Good night, Sebastian." She floated to her apartment, feeling like a teenager after a first date. Inside, she kicked off her heels and reached for her phone to text Maddie all the details, when she noticed she still had Sebastian's jacket draped around her shoulders. She pulled it closer, smiling at the thought that she had a perfect excuse to see him again before their next date, Her phone buzzed with a text from Sebastian. "Just realized you still have my jacket. I'd say I need it back, but it looks much better on you." "I'll return it tomorrow," she replied, grinning at her phone. "Though it is quite comfortable. Keep it as long as you like. Sweet dreams, Penelope." "Sweet dreams, Sebastian." The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of dates and discoveries. Penelope learned that Sebastian was an early riser who went for a run each morning before work, that he had a weakness for horror movies despite being easily startled, and that he volunteered at a literacy program for underprivileged children every other Saturday. Sebastian discovered Penelope's passion for cooking, though she admitted to being merely competent rather than skilled. Her extensive vinyl record collection inherited from her father, and her habit of sketching design ideas on any available surface, including napkins and sometimes her own arm. They fell into an easy rhythm, alternating between elaborate dates at exclusive restaurants and cozy evenings at her apartment or his penthouse. Sebastian's home was exactly as Penelope had imagined, spacious and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. But she was surprised to find it also housed an extensive library and comfortable, lived-in furniture that invited you to curl up with a good book. Their elevator encounters continued, but now they were punctuated with shared smiles and occasional kisses when they were alone. Co-workers at both their offices noticed the change in them. Sebastian was more relaxed at work, less likely to stay until midnight poring over manuscripts, while Penelope brought a new confidence to her design presentations, inspired in part by Sebastian's unwavering belief in her talent. The first hint of trouble came nearly a month into their relationship. Penelope was having lunch with Maddie when her friend suddenly stiffened, staring at her phone with a frown. "What is it?" Penelope asked, taking a bite of her salad. Don't freak out," Maddie said slowly, turning her phone around to show Penelope the screen. It was an article from a gossip website with the headline, "Publishing Powerhouse Sebastian Valez Dating Mystery Woman." Below it was a grainy photo of them walking hand in hand along the river promenade, clearly taken on their first date. "Oh," Penelope said, setting down her fork. "He mentioned this might happen." "There's more," Maddie said hesitantly, scrolling down. "They're speculating about your identity. Some are suggesting you might be using him to advance your career." Penelope felt her stomach drop. "That's ridiculous. I've never even mentioned my work to him in that context." "I know that, and anyone who knows you knows that," Maddie reassured her. "But it might get worse before it gets better. These sites thrive on drama." "What should I do?" "Talk to Sebastian," Maddie advised. "He's dealt with this kind of publicity before. He'll know how to handle it." Penelope nodded, her appetite gone. She texted Sebastian asking if they could talk that evening, trying to keep her message casual so as not to worry him. His response came quickly, of course. "Everything okay? Just want to see you," she replied, not wanting to get into it via text. That evening, Sebastian arrived at her door with takeout from her favorite Thai restaurant and a concerned expression that deepened when he saw her face. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately, setting the food down on her kitchen counter. Wordlessly, she showed him the article on her phone. Sebastian read it quickly, his jaw tightening as he reached the part questioning her motives. "I'm sorry," he said, pulling her into his arms. "This is exactly what I was worried about." "It's not your fault," she murmured against his chest. "I just don't know how to handle it. I've never had people write about me before." Sebastian pulled back slightly to look at her. "The best strategy is usually to ignore it. These stories die down when there's nothing to feed them." He hesitated. "But if it makes you uncomfortable, we could be more discreet." "Avoid public places for a while." Penelope frowned, not liking the idea of hiding their relationship. That feels like letting them win. A smile tugged at Sebastian's lips. I was hoping you'd say that. He kissed her forehead. We'll weather this together, I promise it gets easier. But the gossip didn't die down as Sebastian had predicted. Instead, it intensified. More photos appeared, along with increasingly invasive speculation about Penelope's background and their relationship. The final straw came when a particularly aggressive photographer followed Penelope from her office to a client meeting, shouting questions about whether she was using Sebastian's connections to secure new business. Shaken, she called Sebastian, who immediately sent David to pick her up and bring her to his office. When she arrived at the Paragon Publishing headquarters, his assistant escorted her directly to his corner office, where Sebastian was pacing anxiously. "Are you okay?" he asked the moment she entered, pulling her into a tight embrace. "I'm fine," she assured him, though her hands were still trembling slightly. "Just rattled." He came out of nowhere. Sebastian's expression hardened. "This has gone too far. I'm calling my PR team." He guided her to the leather sofa in his office and made 2 quick calls, one to his head of security, requesting additional protection for Penelope, and another to his PR director, asking her to come to his office immediately. "I'm sorry about all this," he said once he'd hung up, sitting beside her and taking her hand. "I should have been more proactive from the beginning." "It's not your fault," Penelope insisted. "Neither of us expected it to escalate like this." The PR director, a sharp-eyed woman named Victoria, arrived minutes later. After introductions, she got straight to the point. "The most effective way to end the speculation is to control the narrative," she explained. "If you're both comfortable with it, I'd suggest giving an exclusive interview to a reputable publication. It humanizes you both and takes away the mystery that these gossip sites are exploiting." Sebastian looked at Penelope questioningly. "It's your call," he said. "I've done these kinds of interviews before, but I understand if you'd rather keep your privacy." Penelope considered the options. Hiding away felt wrong, but so did having to justify their relationship to the world. "If we do this interview," she said slowly, "can we set boundaries about what we'll discuss?" "Absolutely," Victoria assured her. "We'll provide approved topics in advance and can terminate the interview if it veers into uncomfortable territory." "Then I'm willing to try," Penelope decided. "If it means we can go back to living our lives without being harassed." Sebastian squeezed her hand gratefully. "Thank you. We'll do this together." The interview was arranged for the following week with Lifestyle Monthly, a respected magazine known for its thoughtful profiles. The journalist, a veteran reporter named Eleanor Watson, met them at a neutral location, a private room at an upscale hotel, rather than either of their homes. Eleanor put them at ease immediately, focusing first on their individual accomplishments before tactfully moving to questions about how they met. Sebastian let Penelope take the lead in describing their year of elevator small talk, adding his own perspective on why he'd hesitated to ask her out for so long. "I think many of our readers will relate to that fear of rejection," Eleanor commented with a warm smile. "Especially when it's someone you see regularly." The conversation flowed naturally from there, touching on their shared interests and how they balanced their demanding careers with their relationship. Eleanor asked nothing about Penelope's professional aspirations related to Sebastian's connections, instead focusing on her established career and creative philosophy. As the interview drew to a close, Eleanor asked one final question. "What would you both like people to understand about your relationship?" Sebastian looked at Penelope, silently encouraging her to answer first. "That it's real," she said simply. We're just two people who happened to live in the same building and took a long time to realize what was right in front of us. There's no agenda, no strategy, just two people falling in love. It was the first time either of them had used the word love, and Penelope felt her cheeks flush as she realized what she'd said. But Sebastian was looking at her with such tenderness that any embarrassment quickly faded. "I couldn't have said it better," he added, taking her hand. "What we have is genuine and private, despite this interview. We're opening this small window into our lives in the hope that it satisfies curiosity and allows us to go back to being just Sebastian and Penelope, not subjects for speculation." Eleanor nodded, clearly moved by their sincerity. "Thank you both for your candor. I think my readers will appreciate the genuine connection you share." After she left, Penelope buried her face in Sebastian's shoulder. "I can't believe I said the L word in a magazine interview before saying it to you directly." Sebastian chuckled, wrapping his arms around her. "If it helps, I've been thinking it for weeks." She looked up at him, her heart racing. "You have, Penelope James," he said, his voice soft but certain. "I am completely, utterly in love with you. Have been since you stepped into my elevator in paint-splattered jeans after helping Mrs. Davenport redecorate her apartment, talking about color theory with such passion that you didn't even notice me until we reached the lobby." Penelope laughed, remembering that day. "You looked so confused when I suddenly realized you were there and switched to talking about the weather." "I was enchanted," he admitted, "and terrified you'd realize how smitten I was." "I love you too," she said, rising on her tiptoes to kiss him. "Even when you spent an entire elevator ride talking about the mail room renovations to avoid making eye contact." "Not my finest moment," he agreed, pulling her closer. "But we got here eventually." The interview had the desired effect. When it was published 2 weeks later, accompanied by professional photographs that captured their genuine affection for each other, the invasive paparazzi attention dwindled. Occasional photos of them still appeared in the society pages, but the tone had shifted from speculation to admiration of the publishing power couple. 4 months into their relationship, Sebastian invited Penelope to accompany him to the annual Publishing Excellence Awards, where Paragon was nominated in several categories. It would be their first high-profile industry event together, and Penelope spent weeks working with a stylist to find the perfect gown, eventually settling on an emerald green silk creation that complemented her auburn hair. The night of the event, Sebastian knocked on her door looking devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo. His expression when he saw her was everything she could have hoped for, a mixture of awe and desire that made her blush despite their months together. "You are breathtaking," he said, taking her hand and twirling her slowly to admire the full effect of the dress. "I'll be the envy of every person there." "You clean up pretty well yourself," she replied, straightening his bow tie. "Ready to show me off to your publishing friends?" "More than ready," he assured her. "Though I should warn you, some of them can be a bit pretentious, competitive, judgmental," she supplied with a teasing smile. "All of the above," he admitted, "but you'll win them over in seconds, just like you did with me." The awards ceremony was held at the Grand Maxwell Hotel, with a red carpet leading to the entrance. As their car pulled up, Penelope felt a flutter of nerves at the sight of the photographers and industry reporters lined up to capture arrivals. "Just smile and keep walking," Sebastian advised, squeezing her hand. "I'll be right beside you." To her surprise, Penelope found she enjoyed the red carpet experience. Sebastian kept his arm firmly around her waist, proudly introducing her to industry colleagues, and deflecting any overly personal questions from the press with practiced ease. Inside, They were seated at Paragon's table along with Sebastian's executive team and a best-selling author whose thriller had earned the company 2 nominations. Throughout dinner, Penelope was impressed by Sebastian in his element, confident without being arrogant, gracious to competitors, and genuinely passionate when discussing literature with the authors at nearby tables. When Paragon won the Innovation in Digital Publishing Award, Sebastian kissed Penelope quickly before heading to the stage. In his acceptance speech, he thanked his team by name, acknowledged the authors who trusted the company with their work, and then, to Penelope's surprise, ended with a personal note. And finally, I want to thank someone who reminds me every day why stories matter, who shows me that the greatest adventures don't just happen in books. Thank you, Penelope, for making every elevator ride worth waiting for. The audience chuckled appreciatively at the reference to their now well-known meeting story, and Penelope felt tears prick at her eyes as Sebastian made his way back to their table. "Was that okay?" he whispered as he sat beside her. "I didn't mean to put you on the spot." "It was perfect," she assured him, squeezing his hand under the table. Later, at the after-party, Penelope found herself in conversation with Julian Mercer, the founder of a rival publishing house and Sebastian's former mentor. The older man studied her thoughtfully over his champagne glass. "I've known Sebastian since he was a hungry young editor willing to work 80-hour weeks to prove himself," Julian remarked. "I've never seen him as balanced as he is now. You're good for him." "He's good for me too," Penelope replied honestly. Julian nodded approvingly. "Hold on to that. It's rare in this business to find someone who understands both the passion and the pressure." He glanced across the room to where Sebastian was deep in conversation with an internationally acclaimed author. "He's going to go far, and he'll need someone who grounds him while still encouraging him to fly." "I'll remember that," Penelope said, touched by the older man's insight. As the evening wound down, Sebastian found her by the terrace doors, slipping an arm around her waist and pressing a kiss to her temple. "Ready to head home? I think we've networked enough for one night." In the car, Penelope kicked off her heels with a contented sigh. "Your world is exhausting but fascinating," Sebastian laughed. "You handled it beautifully. I've received 3 texts already from board members saying how impressed they were with you." "Really?" Penelope was genuinely surprised. "What did I say that was so impressive?" "It's not what you said. It's who you are," Sebastian replied, pulling her closer. "Authentic, intelligent, not trying to play industry politics. It's refreshing." When they arrived at their building, Sebastian surprised her by pressing the button for his penthouse instead of her floor. "I have something for you," he explained at her questioning look. "If that's okay, I know it's late." "Of course it's okay," she assured him, curious about his slight nervousness. In his apartment, Sebastian helped her out of her coat and led her to the living room, where a small wrapped package sat on the coffee table. He picked it up, suddenly looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "It's not a special occasion," he began, "but tonight made me realize how seamlessly you fit into every aspect of my life, and I wanted to acknowledge that." He handed her the package, which was about the size of a paperback book. Penelope unwrapped it carefully to reveal a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate silver key on a simple chain. "It's a key to my apartment," Sebastian explained. "And before you say anything, I'm not asking you to move in, not yet anyway, but I want you to feel free to come here anytime, whether I'm home or not. To make this place yours too, in whatever way you're comfortable with." Penelope was touched by the gesture and the thoughtfulness behind it. They hadn't discussed living together, and she appreciated that he wasn't pressuring her while still making it clear that he wanted her to be a more permanent part of his life. "I love it," she said, turning around so he could fasten the necklace. The key rested just below her collarbone, a tangible symbol of his trust and affection. "And I love you. I love you too," he replied, his hands lingering on her shoulders. "More than I ever thought possible." The key became a treasured possession. Though Penelope used it sparingly at first, stopping by to leave surprise notes in Sebastian's kitchen or borrow books from his extensive library. Gradually, she began to feel more comfortable in his space, sometimes working there when her apartment felt too confining for her creative process. Sebastian, in turn, spent more nights at her place, claiming he preferred her lived-in coziness to his sterile penthouse. They developed routine Sunday brunches on his terrace, movie nights on her comfortable couch, morning coffee, wherever they happened to wake up. 6 months into their relationship, Penelope received an exciting opportunity, a chance to design the branding for a major international arts festival. The project would be career-defining, but would require extensive travel over a 3-month period. "This is incredible," Sebastian said when she told him, genuine pride in his voice. "You have to take it." "But we'd be apart for weeks at a time," Penelope pointed out, already feeling torn between her career ambitions and their relationship. "We'll make it work," Sebastian assured her. "I can fly out some weekends, you can come back for others. Technology exists for a reason." His unwavering support convinced her to accept the project, and they spent the next few weeks preparing for their temporary long-distance arrangement. Sebastian surprised her with a state-of-the-art tablet for her design work, while Penelope filled his kitchen with pre-made meals that he could easily heat up on busy nights. The separation was harder than either of them had anticipated. Video calls couldn't replace the comfort of physical presence, and the 5-hour time difference meant their communication windows were limited. But they adapted, sending each other photos of their days and leaving voice messages to wake up to. Sebastian flew to Barcelona for a long weekend during her 2nd month abroad, and they explored the city together between her meetings with the festival organizers. Seeing him in person after weeks apart made Penelope realize just how deeply embedded in her life he had become, and how empty it felt without him. "I missed you," she said as they walked hand in hand along the beach, the Mediterranean stretching endlessly before them. "More than I expected to." "I've been going a little crazy without you," Sebastian admitted. "My assistant says I've been particularly demanding lately." Penelope laughed. "Poor Carmen, I'll have to send her flowers." "Already taken care of," Sebastian said with a smile, along with an apology and a substantial bonus. The weekend ended too quickly, and saying goodbye at the airport was painful. But the reunion when Penelope finally returned home 3 weeks later made every moment of separation worthwhile. Sebastian was waiting at the airport with flowers, looking as anxious as she felt until their eyes met across the arrivals hall. They collided in a fierce embrace, oblivious to the amused glances of travelers around them. "Never again," Sebastian murmured against her hair. 3 months is too long." "Agreed," Penelope said, breathing in his familiar scent, "though the project was worth it." "Absolutely worth it," he agreed, pulling back to look at her with pride. "Your designs were incredible. The whole city is talking about them." In the car on the way home, Sebastian seemed unusually quiet, occasionally glancing at Penelope as if checking that she was really there. "Is everything okay?" she asked, concerned by his pensive mood. "Better than okay," he assured her, squeezing her hand. "Just thinking about something important." Instead of heading directly to their building, David drove them to the riverside promenade where they had walked on their first date. Though it was nearly midnight, Sebastian asked if she'd mind a short stroll before going home. "I'm not too tired for that," Penelope agreed, curious about his plans. The promenade was peaceful at this hour, illuminated by soft lighting and offering a spectacular view of the city skyline reflected in the dark water. They walked in comfortable silence until reaching the spot where they'd shared their first kiss nearly 9 months earlier. "You remember this place?" Sebastian asked, stopping and turning to face her. "Of course," Penelope smiled. "This is where you finally kissed me after a year of weather reports and mailroom updates." Sebastian laughed, his nervousness seemingly easing. "Not my smoothest approach." He took both her hands in his expression growing serious. "Penelope, these past months without you made me realize something I think I've known since the beginning. You are the most important person in my life, and I never want to be apart from you again." Before she could respond, Sebastian reached into his pocket and dropped to one knee, presenting a ring box that he opened to reveal a stunning emerald-cut diamond set in platinum. "Penelope James, will you marry me?" For a moment, Penelope couldn't speak, overwhelmed by emotion and the perfect symmetry of this moment back where their relationship truly began, but now with absolute certainty about their future. "Yes," she finally managed, her voice breaking. "Yes, absolutely yes." Sebastian slid the ring onto her finger with slightly shaking hands before standing and pulling her into a deep kiss. When they broke apart, both were laughing and crying at the same time. "I had this whole speech planned," Sebastian admitted, "about how you make every day brighter just by being in it, how you challenge me to be better, how I can't imagine my life without you. But seeing you step off that plane, all I could think was that's my future right there, and I don't want to wait another day to make it official." "The speech sounds lovely," Penelope said, admiring how the ring caught the light. "But this was perfect, simple and honest, just like us." They decided on a 6-month engagement, wanting enough time to plan a meaningful celebration without an unnecessarily long wait. The news of their engagement made the society pages, of course, but this time the coverage was universally positive, focusing on their modern fairy tale of neighbors who found love after a year of elevator small talk. Planning the wedding brought its own challenges. Sebastian's position meant certain industry figures had to be invited for political reasons, while Penelope was determined to keep the event personal despite its inevitable size. They compromised on a medium-sized ceremony with 150 guests, followed by a larger reception where additional business contacts could join the celebration. Penelope's parents, retired teachers who had moved to Arizona, were initially intimidated by Sebastian's success, but quickly warmed to him when they visited for a long weekend. Sebastian's family, his sister Olivia, her husband, and their 2 children embraced Penelope immediately, with Olivia taking credit for finally pushing her brother to ask her out. "You should have seen him," Olivia told Penelope over brunch one Sunday. "Talking about the neighbor with the amazing smile for months but too chicken to do anything about it." "I was being respectful," Sebastian protested, though his ears had turned slightly red. "You were being a coward," his sister corrected affectionately. "Thank goodness you finally came to your senses." As the wedding approached, Penelope found herself unexpectedly emotional about leaving her apartment. Though she'd practically been living at Sebastian's penthouse for months, officially moving out of the place where their story began felt significant. "We could keep it," Sebastian suggested when he found her sitting nostalgically on the floor surrounded by packing boxes. "Use it as your studio space." "That's sweet, but impractical," Penelope said. "Besides, we've already agreed to convert the guest room in the penthouse into a proper workspace for me." Sebastian sat beside her, picking up a framed photo of them taken at the publishing awards. "What if we moved?" Penelope looked at him in surprise. You mean, leave the building entirely? Why not? We could find a place that's ours from the beginning, not mine that you're moving into. He took her hand, running his thumb over her engagement ring. Something with character like you. Maybe a brownstone with room for a family someday, if that's something you want. The suggestion of children was new. They discussed wanting them eventually, but hadn't talked specifics. The thought that Sebastian was already planning for that future made Penelope's heart swell. "I'd like that," she said softly. "A place that's ours, with room to grow." The wedding day arrived in early autumn, exactly 1 year after their first date. They chose a historic boutique hotel for both the ceremony and reception, its architecture and gardens providing a romantic backdrop that needed minimal decoration. Penelope wore a simple but elegant gown of ivory silk with delicate lace details, while Sebastian opted for a classic black tuxedo. The ceremony was brief but deeply personal, with readings selected from their favorite books and vows they had written themselves. "Penelope," Sebastian began, his voice steady but full of emotion. "Before you, my life was orderly, predictable, and incomplete in ways I didn't fully understand. You brought color and warmth and beautiful chaos. You taught me that the most important moments aren't the big achievements or milestones, but the small daily interactions, a conversation in an elevator, a shared cup of coffee, the way you fall asleep while reading beside me. I promise to cherish those moments, to support your dreams as fiercely as you've supported mine, and to love you more with each passing day. You are my home, my heart, my favorite story, and I can't wait to write our next chapters together." Penelope blinked back tears as she began her own vows. "Sebastian, you once told me that publishing is about bringing stories into the world that transport, comfort, and connect people. What you didn't know was that you were doing exactly that for me, every day. You connected with me through small kindnesses and thoughtful questions. You comforted me when I doubted myself, and you transported me from a life where I was content but lonely to one filled with partnership and possibility. I promise to be your biggest supporter and honest critic, to never let us lose sight of what matters amid life's complications, and to love you completely through whatever plot twists come our way. Thank you for finally asking me out after a year of weather reports. It was worth the wait." There was gentle laughter from the guests at her last words, and Sebastian's smile was brilliant as he slid the wedding band onto her finger moments later. The reception that followed was elegant but joyful, with Sebastian surprising Penelope by having arranged for her favorite band to perform their first dance song live. Speeches from Olivia and Maddie had everyone alternately laughing and wiping away tears, while Sebastian's brief toast to his bride left few dry eyes in the room. "To my wife," he said, raising his glass, "who said yes immediately when I finally found the courage to ask." Instead of a traditional honeymoon, they had decided on something more meaningful, a literary tour of Europe, visiting the settings of books they both loved. For 2 weeks, they explored Paris, Venice, London, and the English countryside, wandering through Shakespeare's Globe Theatre hand in hand and kissing on the Pont des Arts as the sun set over the Seine. Upon their return, they began house hunting in earnest, eventually finding a beautifully restored Victorian brownstone with a private garden. The house needed some updating, but its character and charm captivated them both immediately. The closing process was expedited thanks to Sebastian's connections, and they moved in just before the holidays, deciding to host both their families for Christmas as a housewarming. The gathering was chaotic but wonderful. Penelope's parents, Sebastian's sister and her family, plus Maddie and her new boyfriend, all crowded around a table in their still not fully furnished dining room. Children's laughter echoed through the high-ceilinged rooms as Olivia's kids played hide and seek, while the adults shared stories and too much wine. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed or headed home, Sebastian and Penelope sat by the fire in their new living room, a comfortable silence between them. "Happy?" Sebastian asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Completely," Penelope confirmed, leaning into him. "Though I do sometimes miss those elevator rides." Sebastian laughed. "You're the only person I know who'd be nostalgic for awkward small talk." "It wasn't always awkward," she protested. "Sometimes it was downright informative. I learned a lot about weather patterns and mail sorting systems. And I learned that you look particularly beautiful when trying not to laugh at my pathetic attempts at conversation," Sebastian countered, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You ever think about how different our lives would be if you hadn't asked me out that day?" Penelope wondered. "If we just kept riding the elevator together for years, talking about nothing?" Sebastian considered the question seriously. "I think I would have cracked eventually. Probably in some embarrassingly dramatic fashion declared my feelings in front of a crowd of neighbors or something equally mortifying." "I'm glad you didn't wait that long," Penelope said with a smile. "Me too," Sebastian agreed. "Though I still can't believe you said yes so quickly." "You surprised me. Best surprise of your life, without question," he assured her, pulling her closer. "Though I have one that might compete." Penelope looked up at him curiously. "What do you mean?" Sebastian reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wrapped package. "Merry Christmas, a few hours early." Intrigued, Penelope unwrapped the gift to find a simple white box. Inside was a tiny pair of baby booties, knitted in soft yellow yarn. She looked up at Sebastian with wide eyes, her heart racing. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm not pregnant, if that's what you're asking," Sebastian teased, earning a playful swat from his wife. "But I thought if you're ready we might start trying. This big house needs more than just the two of us." Tears sprang to Penelope's eyes as she nodded. "I'm ready. I want that with you." "Good," Sebastian said, his voice thick with emotion. "Because I can't think of anything I want more than to start a family with you." Penelope placed the booties carefully on the coffee table before turning to kiss her husband deeply. "I love you, Sebastian Valez. Even when you were just the guy who talked to me about the weather." "And I love you, Penelope Valez," he replied, still savoring the sound of her new name. "Especially when you were just the neighbor who said yes." Exactly 1 year later, they welcomed their daughter, Lily Olivia Valez, named for the flowers Sebastian had brought on their first date, and his sister who had pushed him to finally ask Penelope out. As they sat in the hospital room, Sebastian holding their newborn while Penelope rested beside them, he marveled at how a simple elevator ride had changed the course of his life forever. "What are you thinking about?" Penelope asked, watching her husband's face as he gazed at their daughter. "I'm thinking about all the elevator rides I wasted talking about the weather," Sebastian replied with a smile. "And how asking you one simple question gave me everything I never knew I needed." "Some things are worth waiting for," Penelope said softly, reaching out to touch their daughter's tiny hand. Sebastian looked from their child to his wife, overwhelmed with gratitude for the family they had created together. "And some things are worth taking a chance on even when you're terrified of rejection." "I'm glad you took that chance," Penelope whispered. "So am I," Sebastian agreed, leaning down to kiss her gently. "So am I."